In my town, bodies have been appearing in the trees. No one talks about them. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Lids Lunacy here. You already know what time it is. We're back for another episode of Creepy Crochet and Creepypasta, a series where I crochet something creepy and talk about something even creepier like scary stories from around the internet. Today, we're going to be crocheting a little tiny mini Mothman. This is my Mothman pattern that is available in my Etsy shop, link in description. We're making him with Bernat velvet, and I think also I'm going to use some acrylic yarn just to mix up the textures a bit. So yeah, you'll get to see how that turns out at the end of the video. Today we're going to be reading some scary stories off of Reddit, some creepypastas from Reddit, some good old-fashioned fictional horror. We are going to be reading one story that's by orangeplr, who is a favorite on this channel, and some other authors are going to be thrown into the mix as well. So I'm very excited to get into today's stories. Without further ado, let's get into today's scary stories. Okay, so up first we have In my town, bodies have been appearing in the trees. No one talks about them. This story is by Horror Junkie 123 and it will be linked in the description down below. I'm excited for this one. Let's get into it. It really freaked me out when I discovered the first one. Not that it doesn't now, but the first was a massive shock to the system. I mean, who wouldn't be downright horrified at the sight of a dead girl dangling from a tree branch? The one who put her there. That's who. I was 18 when I came across the mutilated corpse. That day will always stick out in my mind. It was ground zero, the catalyst for the demented circus act that my life would devolve into. Little did I know, it would all be downhill from there. Cheer up, dude. Being held back isn't the end of the world. Just means you get more opportunities to hit on that cute sophomore you've been crushing on. Jacob smirked, nudging my arm. I sighed. It's not the end of the world, but it might as well be. While all of you get to prance across that stage, I'll be stuck shoveling shit in the pig pen. Jacob stayed silent. A breeze swept through the air, rustling the crisp brown and yellow leaves that littered the ground. He knew I was right. I was the farmer's son, and my father viewed me as nothing more than free labor. An otherwise useless, good-for-nothing piece of equipment to be tossed to the curb once I lost my value. And with how abhorrent my grades were, I wasn't exactly proving him wrong. I mean, look on the bright side. Maybe you can... Jacob trailed off, and I nearly bumped into him. What gives, man? You can't just stop right in front of me like that. I grumbled, beginning to step around him. Jacob suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm. A pang of fear jolted through my chest. Jacob was a thin, bony boy with less muscle than SpongeBob SquarePants. Nevertheless, he maintained a grip so tight around my wrist that I thought it might snap. Before I could ask him what in the world he thought he was doing, he pointed to a tree in a nearby clearing. That's when I noticed the body. My heart plummeted into my stomach. Adrenaline surged through my veins as my fight or flight began to kick in. Though every synapse in my brain screamed at me to run, I found myself glued to the spot. Grayson, is that what I think it is? Jacob muttered, shattering my morbid reverie. I'm pretty sure. What do we do? Should we call the cops? How has no one seen it by now? I'm gonna get a closer look, Jacob murmured as he started to trudge through the suspended remains. I debated on leaving. I wanted to put as much distance between me and that gruesome scene as I possibly could. But in the end, my curiosity won out. I can't believe I'm doing this, I mumbled, trotting to catch up to my friend. We continued to walk through the open field until we stood directly in front of it. I don't know why, but I hadn't expected the smell. The putrid stench of rot and decay swam into my nostrils well before we reached the cadaver. It nearly made me gag from how overpowering it was. Once we were right up on it, I was really able to drink in its features. The deceased was a woman. It made me nauseous the way her corpse was softly swaying in the wind. Thin black hair clung to her blood-splattered nightgown. I think it was white at one time, but the fabric had degraded to a deep yellow. Her brittle, pallid appendages hung limply, never to regain mobility again. But worst of all was her face. The woman's pale blue eyes were bulging from her skull. Dried blood trailed from the sockets down her cheeks and eventually pooled at the noose securely tightened around her neck. That was what really got me. Her eyes. I could still see the pain and fear behind each of her protruding irises, and my heart absolutely shattered for her. I couldn't stand to look any longer. Jacob, I'm calling the police. We shouldn't be here. What if the killer is hiding nearby? He turned to me, mouth slightly still agape. Yeah, the cops. You're right. Let's go. Jacob and I returned to the sidewalk where we'd first noticed the woman while I dialed 911. The phone rang for longer than it should have before the operator's voice cut through the line. 911, what is your emergency? The woman sounded exhausted, like years upon years of 2 packs a day were whittling down her lung capacity. Hi, yes, I found a dead body. Can you send someone to, I don't know, take her to the morgue, I guess? What is your location? Emergency services will be en route momentarily. Coming up on the intersection of Maple Road and Cherry Street. Please hurry. The operator suddenly cleared her throat, effectively cutting me off. Pardon me, but you said the intersection of Maple Road and Cherry Street, yes? My brows furrowed. The lady on the other end of the line had dropped her reassuring facade. She sounded almost accusatory. Yeah, that's right. Sir, please continue to go about your day. Nothing is out of the ordinary at the intersection of Cherry and Maple. Services will not be dispatched. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Everything was normal? I'd just seen a fucking lynching victim with my own 2 eyes, and the operator was telling me that that was normal? No, maybe you misheard me. I said there's a dead body. I need you to send someone. The line was silent for an intense moment before the woman's voice cut back over my phone speaker. Please do not submit a false report or you will face legal repercussions. Have a nice day. This isn't a joke. Hello? Hello? My persistence did no good. The operator hung up on me. So, what'd they say? Are they sending someone? Jacob asked, gazing up at me expectantly. No, actually, I said, lowering the phone from my ear. They told me nothing was wrong. I was left in complete shock for the remainder of the day. If the police wouldn't take me seriously, that left me little choice but to go home and try to erase it from my memory. But I just couldn't. The image of that woman's lifeless corpse was permanently seared into my brain. I felt like I owed it to her to find justice, or at the very least, someone to give her a proper burial. Grayson, dinner, Mom shouted. I'll be there in a second, I yelled back, gently placing the last of the freshly laid eggs into my basket. The only good thing about being an involuntary farmhand, it helped keep my mind occupied. At least it was good for something. I silently joined my parents at the table. Mom set a plate full of meatloaf and mashed potatoes before me. Normally, I would have demolished it, but in light of what I witnessed earlier that day, I didn't know if my appetite would ever come back. Why aren't you eating, honey? You've barely touched your potatoes. Is something wrong? Mom asked, a twinge of concern percolating her words. Yeah, so this is gonna sound crazy, but spit it out, boy, Dad interjected through a mouthful of food. I saw a dead body today. My parents locked eyes with one another. Dad gulped down his food, but he didn't motion to take another bite. Mom stared silently at him, sweat beading on her brow. That was probably nothing. Just a leftover display from Halloween. Mom chuckled nervously. Your mother is right, Dad affirmed, flashing me a toothy grin. It was probably just a figment of your imagination. No need for concern. The fork trembled in his grasp as he stabbed a slab of meatloaf. Don't worry about finishing dinner. You can be excused if you're not hungry, Mom said, that anxious smile still plastered to her face. Thanks, I'm gonna take you up on that offer. I scooted my chair out from the table and returned to my duties. I didn't want to spend any more time around my folks that evening. They were acting strange, and I didn't like it one bit. Trepidation bubbled in my gut as Jacob and I walked to school. The trip was marred by a tense, uneasy silence. Then, Jacob said what was on both of our minds. Grayson, do you think she'll still be there? I sure hope not, I said, keeping my eyes locked to the ground. We each subconsciously held our breaths as we approached the clearing. I prayed that the woman would be gone. My heart palpitated wildly in my chest, blood rushing in my ears. I clenched my eyes shut as we came into view, and there it was. A grass clearing sat before us. Daisies and dandelions swayed among the lush green blades. I peered beyond it into the trees. I suddenly grew lightheaded. She was still there. The woman's lifeless, decaying corpse hung from the rope, those horrible, unblinking eyes visibly even from our distance. I felt like I was going to be sick. The cops had completely ignored my call. Without warning, Jacob took off in a dead sprint. I gave chase, my legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. We ran and ran, all the way until we reached the school. I didn't even need to ask Jacob why he'd done it. I was probably going to do the same eventually. I couldn't focus for the remainder of the day. The hands on the clock seemed to tick by in slow motion. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Those bulging, desperate eyes. I couldn't escape them. After the longest day of my life, I again found myself by Jacob's side walking home. We didn't say anything to each other. We just kept going, dreading the encounter that we knew would come. We gradually approached the clearing. I couldn't do it. Not again. But I had to. It was like a train wreck. Something so demented and screwed up that you just can't bring yourself to look away. "All right, man. I'm going to run the rest of the way. Your call if you want to come with," Jacob said, already turning away from me. "Go ahead. I'll join you in a sec," I muttered, wondering if I was making the right decision. "Suit yourself," Jacob retorted, averting his gaze from the field before jogging past. This was it. The last time. One more look, then I'd never peer into those woods again. I was done. That's what I told myself, at least. I steeled my resolve and quickly glanced at the tree that I'd previously seen the woman hanging from. I immediately regretted it. I bent over and lost my lunch all over the dried leaves littering the ground, because when I glanced up at that tree, the woman wasn't alone. There was a man dangling from the branch opposite her, connected to the bow from an almost identical noose. His eyes mirrored the woman's. Two fear-struck, bloodied orbs jutting from his head, congealed, viscous liquid oozing down his neck. I couldn't take it any longer. I sprinted after Jacob but didn't stop until I reached my house. What was going on? Were the cops working with a serial killer? Even if they were, why wouldn't they at least come pick up the bodies? Fortunately, I'd never received the answer to some of those questions. Some, but not all. It didn't stop with those two. Bodies began appearing in trees at an alarming rate, and they weren't just confined to the clearing anymore. The dead were popping up everywhere. In the big oak by the library, in the maple tree in front of town hall. Hell, a dead man even showed up hanging from the beech tree on the school's front lawn. Only once was it ever anyone I recognized. I knew Kent Taylor. He was the owner of a little diner off Main Street. He was one of the nicest men I'd ever met. Needless to say, when his body appeared swinging from a rope on my walk home, I burst into tears. He didn't deserve that. None of them did. I desperately wanted to get to the bottom of the whole thing. But what could I do? No one was willing to talk about it, and the police were utterly useless. I tried to contact them multiple times, but in the end, I was given a warning for submitting a false report. I was caught between a rock and a hard place. So, left with seemingly no other option, I turned a blind eye. Obviously, I was terrified beyond belief, but I think we all were. Everyone seemed on edge, like we were all anticipating something that none of us wanted to acknowledge. Time marched slowly by, agonizingly so. Each day felt longer than its predecessor. Still, after what seemed like an eternity, the day finally came. Jacob's graduation. A whirlwind of emotions swirled within me as I sat and watched my classmates walk across the stage. Huge, content grins were plastered across their faces, the light in their eyes burning brightly. It should have been me up there accepting my diploma. It wasn't fair that all my peers got to escape this hellhole while I was forced to endure for another year. It just wasn't. I waved as Jacob accepted his diploma from the dean. He beamed back at me, not a worry in the world. Though jealousy burned inside me like a hot iron, I managed to suppress it. I wished so badly that I could have adopted Jacob's same carefree attitude, even just for a moment. Now, I'm not so sure. Once the ceremony was complete, I swam through the crowd to meet my friend. Just a quick, "Congratulations," and I'd be on my way. No point in sticking around any longer. "Jacob, congrats, buddy," I said, clasping him on the shoulder. He reciprocated my greeting with a warm smile. "Thank you, Gray. I really appreciate you coming. I would have understood if you wanted to stay home. And have to pick up crusty cow patties? Hell no. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Jacob chuckled, his grin growing even wider. Even if I was consumed by envy, that didn't make me any less proud of him. It really does mean a lot to me. More than you know. Heck, I might even miss this place a little because of you," he quipped, drawing a smile to my own face. I lightly slugged him in the arm. "Oh, who are you kidding? You and I both know that won't happen. Remind me again, where are you running off to this summer?" "Landed an internship at Prentice Financial. I'll be going to Boston for the next couple months, remember?" "Ah, yeah. I do remember you telling me that now. Live it up for the both of us, man. And try not to forget about me, okay? It's gonna be real lonely around here without you, you know?" "Me? Forget about you? Wouldn't dream of it," he said, shooting me a wink. 2 weeks from that day, Jacob was scheduled to fly out. I didn't get to see him off, but I wished him the best. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first. Not until he started ignoring my texts. I thought that maybe he'd just been busy with the move. I mean, it's stressful to leave the place you've called home for your entire life and start anew. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, though. I should have listened to my gut. It was another 3 days before I found him. Dad had sent me to the corner store to pick up some salt when I happened to glance up at the tree overshadowing the old-timey little shop. I will never forget what I saw. Jacob's lifeless corpse stared back at me. His eyes bulged from his skull, and tiny rivulets of dried blood streamed down his cheeks. My heart shattered and simultaneously began to race in my chest. Jacob, my best friend in the entire world, was strung up like a puppet, and not a single soul acknowledged him. I dropped to my knees and wept. I cried and cried, ignoring strange looks from passerby. It wasn't right. Jacob never hurt a fly. He didn't deserve to die. Not like that. I stood back up with a newfound rage bubbling within me. I was going to find out who did this to him, and I was going to make them pay. I abandoned the salt on the sidewalk. I didn't care what Dad would say. He could get his own damn salt if he needed it so badly. I continued on my warpath, straight to the only place that I knew I could find some answers, Jacob's house. I knocked furiously on the front door, anger simmering over all the while. Jacob's parents would tell me something. They had to. Jacob's mother answered the door. Her eyes were puffy and sullen, like she'd been crying for days on end. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Her only son was brutally murdered, and the police didn't give two shits about it. That extinguished my ire, just a bit. Mrs. Allen, please, don't blow me off. I need to know. Who did this to him? And why? Tears began to cloud my vision. The reality of my grim discovery still hadn't fully set in. Did what? To whom? She replied. Her voice was defeated and hoarse. She was hiding something. You know who. Jacob. Your son? I found his body by the corner store. Please, Mrs. Allen, please tell me who did this. Jacob? No, Jacob is in Boston. He's an intern. My boy is doing just fine, she replied despondently, staring into space. Jacob is not fine. Please, you have to... It was nice of you to stop by, Grayson. Tell your parents we said hello. And with that, the door shut in my face. It's been 2 days since then. I have a theory, and I'm going to test it. I have to know, for Jacob's sake. I think whoever's doing this is killing anyone who tries to leave. So tonight, I'm going to find out for myself if that's true. I've got a cousin who lives in a major city. She said it's okay if I crash at her place for a while. Either I'm going to get out of here, or I'm going to die trying. I'm going to take Dad's pickup truck and pray that it doesn't give out on me. I'm posting this in case I don't make it out. Please, please heed my warning. If you drive through a town called Walnut Valley in northern Kentucky, don't stick around. Because if you do, you might not make it out alive. Oh, I really liked that one. With all the death and carnage that I read about just by reading horror stories, just consuming horror media in general, this one, like, I don't know, it really tugged on my heartstrings. Even the woman at the beginning, and then even more his friend, they share that cute little moment at the graduation, and just that little bit of character development made his death that much more impactful for me. I really liked that story. I've read a couple of this person's stories on my TikTok. The story was a bit longer, so I wanted to share it in a YouTube video, but I really like their writing style, so I'll be reading more from them in the future. Anyways, let's get into story number 2. My girlfriend talks in her sleep. She's been saying the most horrible things recently. And it seems like this story is by an account that has been deleted, unfortunately, but let's get into it. By the way, this was posted on nosleep 8 years ago. I'm infatuated with her. Utterly infatuated, and it wasn't at a healthy level. Far from it. I would think about her every moment she was away. I would sometimes sit on my couch and just stare at my phone waiting for her to text. I'd tell myself, don't contact her, don't, it will come off as too strong. But then I'd still find myself clicking her name on my contact list before my inner voice would continue. You don't want her to know how desperately smitten you are with her. It's unattractive. It will scare her off. No, you must wait for her to call you this time. But it was excruciating and exhausting, almost unbearable. I once heard that the ancient Greeks believed that falling madly and irrationally in love with somebody was a curse that you would wish upon your enemies. I could never understand what they meant. After all, isn't falling head over heels in love the ultimate goal nowadays? But now that it's happened to me, I have to say, the ancient Greeks were right. This is a curse. I was barely in control of myself, almost as though my infatuation with her had possessed me. Did bro get one wish willowed? The two of us are sexually active together, but still in the dating phase. Am I allowed to say that? Am I gonna get in trouble for that? We were at that make or break era of a blossoming relationship where we'd either have the talk and formally be in a relationship, or we'd start to slowly drift apart. The latter of which I don't think I'd be able to cope with. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to. Almost everything about her captivated me. The way she held her hand over her mouth when she laughed, how she'd caress the pendant of her necklace when she was frightened, how she'd twirl her hair in her finger when she was excited. All of it, her smell, her smile, her eyes. I know, it probably makes you sick reading about it. I feel the same way. I was never the hopeless romantic type. But now I can't stop fantasizing about her. I think about us doing the long 3-hour hike up to the magnificent view from one of our first dates, to that first kiss, as we overlooked the lights of the city. But this time I'd get down on one knee, bring out the ring, and well, you know what would happen next. Alright, fine, I'll stop. Yes, this is a girl I'd only been casually dating for a couple months. I shouldn't be thinking about proposing yet. I know that. I'm just barely able to control myself any longer. I feel as though I'm losing power over the decisions I make. And that brings me to why I'm here writing this out at the moment. It started with the first real thing that troubled me about her. We'd never actually spent a night together. No matter how late she was over, once either of us showed signs of being tired, she'd up and leave. She wouldn't leave awkwardly or in anger, just a casual kiss goodnight, a smile, and a call me soon. It was something I didn't really even take notice the first few times she did it. But after almost 8 weeks of dating, it was becoming strange. I'd have to ask her about it. It took drinking almost an entire bottle of wine before I had the courage to do it. She looked almost defeated when I asked and lowered her eyes in embarrassment. I knew this talk would come eventually. She took in a deep breath with a long drawn-out exhale. Recently, she paused again. I started talking in my sleep. She shook her head in embarrassment. It's called somniloquy. I looked it up. I shrugged and laughed out loud. My demeanor seemed to say, "That's it?" "No, Stephen, listen," she said. She wasn't laughing. "It's bad. It's completely out of control. It's not just random words or gibberish. No, it's horrible. I say horrible, disgusting things." She started to raise her voice, breath heavy, and tear up. I approached her and held her. I told her it couldn't be that bad. I told her to spend the night. I told her she was probably exaggerating. I was wrong. That night she stayed at my house, but she warned me of something before falling asleep. "Whatever you do, don't wake me up. It makes me really scared and disoriented if that happens. And don't respond to me. Just ignore it." I nodded and agreed. "If it becomes too much," she continued, "just leave the room and sleep on the couch. I won't mind." I told her not to worry about it. I told her that it wouldn't be a big deal. I told her I wouldn't leave the couch, I'd stay beside her in the bed. But I was wrong. I couldn't even last one night. We both fell asleep without incident. I don't know how many hours passed, but I woke up in the dark with the sensation that someone was watching me. And then I remembered she was with me. She was actually spending the night. I smiled. But then I noticed the shadowy outline of her sitting up on the bed. She was looking down at me, staring. It creeped me out. I'll admit it. Her posture was entirely different. It was as though it wasn't even her at all. Then she spoke. It wasn't her voice that I heard. It was much lower and gravelly, like something out of a horror movie.
"I'll chew the skin from your bones."
I froze. This is genuinely freaking me out. Help. At first, I just kept looking at her. This was not at all what I expected. I thought it would be more like the way Tourette's is often portrayed. Just random swearing and shouting. I honestly thought to myself, what will I do if she attacks me right now? What if she really does try to chew the skin from my bones? But then she just lied down and went back to sleep. I was creeped out. I tried to lie back down and ignore her, but I struggled. I couldn't even close my eyes without thinking, maybe she's sitting up again and staring at me. And then one time I rolled over to look at her, and she was. Her face was pressed right towards mine. Her breath was foul and rotted. Something that was most certainly not normal for her. She spoke again in the same voice as before.
"If you don't move to the couch, you'll be dead by morning."
That did it for me. I sat up in a moment and headed for the living room. She made some sort of wheezing sound as I left. I think it was supposed to be laughter. I was lying on the couch, but I wasn't going to be able to fall back asleep. I was far too shaken. I was staring out towards the window, hoping to see the first few hints of the sun rising. And then I thought I heard something from the bedroom. I listened, and then I heard it again.
"Stephen."
It was the same low and gravelly voice. It sounded like a witch. I tried to just ignore it at first, but then it continued.
"Stephen."
Still, I said nothing.
"I know you can hear me, Stephen. You're awake now. Why don't you come back into the bedroom?
The voice barely sounded human.
Or maybe you'd prefer if I come to you."
I didn't say anything. I was told not to, but I listened. If I heard her start walking towards the bedroom door, I'm not even joking, I would have run right out of the apartment. But she had asked me to not respond to her sleep talking. so I didn't. And then I heard her once more.
Sorry if this spoils your plans.
She began laughing.
The two of you were supposed to walk that trail again.
She started. I wasn't even remotely prepared for what she'd say next.
You'd both be so tired when you'd reach the top. You'd look over the city, then you'll get on one knee and bring out the ring.
She began laughing. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a problem with sleep talking. It was something much more. Something supernatural. I'd never told anybody about my proposal fantasy. There was simply no way she could have known about any of it. This was no longer about merely talking in one's sleep. This was about possession. I can't go back into the bedroom. I have no idea what would happen if I did. Instead, I'm going to wait it out, holding up in my living room until the sun rises. I have a couple more hours yet. I can hear her laughing occasionally in the bedroom. It's still not her voice. Still that same low-pitched cackle. But as I sit on my couch writing this out, here's what scares me the most. Maybe my infatuation and utter obsession with her wasn't normal. I said before that I felt like I was losing control of myself. More so, I believe, than the typical falling in love story. No. I fear that the infatuation I felt was the entity slowly taking control of me. Of it controlling my thoughts, fears, ambitions, and anxieties. Maybe once I become completely absorbed, a transfer would occur, and she would be free of it. I know I should leave. That I should open the front door, get in my car, and drive away from here. But I can't. I can't leave her. I've already lost control. I'm infatuated with her. Utterly infatuated. Someone commented, double it and give it to the next person. No, because really, what are you supposed to do? It actually does remind me of the One Wish Willow from Obsession. I don't know why, but I heard the old lady yelling chocolate from SpongeBob as her voice, LOL.
Chocolate. I remember when they first invented chocolate. I hated it.
I'm sorry. What happened after that? His account does not exist. I'm curious. Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe, because this is posted to nosleep, where you're kind of supposed to roleplay as the person is someone who's actually asking for advice. So maybe the deletion of the account is part of the spook factor. I doubt it. It's been 8 years. It's probably just one of those things. The account's gone. Great story, though. I've said it once. I'll say it a million more times. I love relationship adjacent horror stories. Let's get into story number 3. Guys, the man, the myth, the legend, orangeplr posted a story hot off the press 4 days ago to nosleep. There's a long line forming outside of my house. I don't know what they're waiting for. Immediately, that has me hooked. That is such a good title. I just love creepy shit like this. I love when you take an ordinary thing and you make it creepy. Because a long line forming outside of your house, like, people forming a line is inherently not a weird thing to do, but outside of the context of somewhere where it would seem normal, like at a grocery store, before a store opens, outside of a concert, people just lining up outside of your house and you not knowing what the hell they're doing there, that is creepy. Super excited to see where he goes with this one. I'm gonna stop yapping now. Let's get into it. Forgive me. It started on a Monday, right on the hottest day of the summer. I keep a pretty strict morning routine. I have since mid-high school. When I realized that, it's true. Surviving off of 4 hours of sleep and 5 Pop-Tarts eaten spread out throughout the course of the day really isn't very good for your mental and physical well-being. I go to bed early with a full nighttime routine, complete with noise-canceling headphones, and I wake up well-rested around 6 a.m., which is right when the sun is coming up in mid-July. That's one of the reasons I really prefer the winter. I like to be up before it's bright outside. It gives me a sense of privacy for those few hours before anyone else is awake. It gives me some time where I know without a shadow of a doubt that no one will be thinking about me, looking at me, or trying to talk to me. It did, at least. On this Monday, I was following my usual schedule. I rolled out of bed to the sound of my cat shrieking at me, fed them, hopped in the shower, got dressed, and put on some coffee. I didn't notice him until I walked to the window, mug in hand, warming both of my palms. He was unassuming. He stood right at the end of my driveway, in front of the concrete path through the grass to my front door. He was wearing comfortable clothes, like what you might put on for a trip to the airport. Sweatpants, hoodie. His hair was wet, as if he'd also recently gotten out of the shower, just like I had. I frowned, bringing my coffee to my mouth as I watched him. I didn't recognize him, but that wasn't saying much. I didn't know many of my neighbors. I mostly just kept to myself. He didn't have a dog, so he wasn't walking one. He wasn't holding newspapers or mail. In fact, this man lacked any sense of duty at all. There was no urgency or responsibility in his stance. He gave me no indication that he was only pausing in front of my yard to smell the flowers before continuing along with his day. He was just standing. I found my work bag where I'd left it the night before, sitting on my couch. I packed it back up, shoving my laptop and refilled water bottle into the pocket. When I got back to the window, he was still standing there. He was looking around almost like he was bored. He looked up at the clouds, then down at his feet, then at what must have been a watch on his wrist. I hesitated, taking one last sip of my coffee before putting my cup in the sink. Then I opened my front door, stepping outside into the rapidly warming day. "Hey," I called out, my voice still gravelly from sleep. I crossed my arms over my chest as if it was cold, hugging myself. "Can I help you, man?" The man seemed surprised to hear me speak, looking up from a crack in the pavement that he'd been closely examining. He blinked, the silence stretching between us across the lawn. "No," he said finally. "I'm okay." More silence, this time feeling far more tense. I felt my face grow hot in embarrassment for the both of us. How didn't he understand that this was strange, that he was standing there in front of my house at 7 in the morning and wouldn't tell me why? "Okay," I mumbled, finally, frustrated. I was never good at confrontation. I locked the door behind me, taking extra care to make sure it was latched securely. It had of course crossed my mind that he could be casing me, but who would be so stupid as to do it out in the open like this, where I could clearly see his face and identify him to police later if I had to? I got in my van and backed out of the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see him, standing there, watching me pull out. He didn't move. I told myself this was fine. This was just a weird story to tell Casey later, another one of those instances where something strange and unexplainable happens to someone that realistically has a perfectly reasonable explanation. I was fine with not knowing why this happened because he'd be gone by the time I got home, and that would be that. I was early to work, but I was always a little early. I hung out in the break room waiting to clock in. 10 minutes before my shift started, Casey arrived. He looked more tired than usual, with bags under his eyes, and he groaned when he spotted me, slumping down across from me. "Good morning," he grumbled, drawing out the G. I couldn't help it. A small smile tugged at my lips. Casey expressed everything so animatedly, as opposed to my usual monotone. It left me wondering every day what he was going to be like. He was my only sense of entertainment at work, and maybe in general. There wasn't many people that I genuinely considered a friend of mine, but he placed himself adamantly in that role almost as soon as I'd met him a few years ago in this very room. All of the stress of the morning melted away. "You're not going to want to hear this," I said, "but you forgot your name tag." He looked down at himself and threw his head back in agony. "Shit, damn it, Megan will have my ass. 3rd time this week." I checked the time, 5 minutes until I clocked in. "Still getting those calls?" "Yes, my god, they won't give it a break." He scrubbed at his face. His hair looked greasy, like he'd forgotten to wash it. "I've tried blocking the numbers, I've called the phone company, whoever it is won't stop. They must be buying burner phones or something. I really think it's that guy from last month that I pissed off. All you said was no refund for that destroyed phone. That thing was like a couple of slivers of glass tied together by some wires." "I know." He rested his head on his arm, slumping over the table. Well, apparently he found another place to buy it off him because he could sure afford a new one. It was time for me to start work. As I stood up, everything that I wanted to tell him about rushed back to me. Something about how unexplained the calls he'd been getting were had reminded me. "Oh my god, I have to tell you something later. When's your lunch break?" Casey could always make things feel a little less serious. He could always make me feel better, make me see that things weren't so drastic. I hoped he'd never lose that quality about him. When work was over, the sun was low over the horizon, drenching the parking lot in orange. My day had felt long and stressful, as most did, but I still relished the sense of purpose and community that it afforded me. As much as I liked being home and by myself, being at my job was crucial to my stability, and I always had a hard time transferring from one state to another, especially when I left in the evening, and the drive home felt eerie and quiet compared to the bright fluorescent lights and conversation I'd been submerged in moments before. I listened to the radio, letting the sound of newscasters and commercials comfort me as I took my route home. As soon as I turned down my street, I knew something was wrong. I knew before I even saw them. There were 6 people now, all standing in front of my house. The man from this morning was still there, leaning from left to right to give each foot a break from the burden of his weight, right where I'd left him. But now there were more of them, lined up behind him in single file, all unassuming and dressed comfortably as if they had nowhere else to be but here. I pulled into my driveway, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I waited a moment before turning off the engine, the radio droning in the background, not absorbing anything the garbled voices were saying. Was I supposed to call the police? That sounded like my personal nightmare. Was this some sort of group effort to freak me out? Some kind of gang stalking tactic? I couldn't think of a single person who might hate me enough to do something like this. I tended to stay out of people's way. I got out of the car, shrugging my bag over my shoulder, mulling over what I should say. "Excuse me," I called out, taking a few steps towards the line, cautious. What's going on here? Maybe it wasn't the most eloquent way to ask, but I could hardly even get those words out. My voice was shaking just as much as my hands still were. A couple of people looked at each other. I swore I saw one of them shrug. A younger man, maybe a few years younger than me. "We're waiting," the younger man said finally, smiling politely. It was like the smile I gave customers after an extra grueling rush. Tired. I stared at him blankly. I looked between each of their faces. That look was the only thing they had in common. That exhaustion, sewn in a little below the surface, somehow mingling with a certain sense of excitement that hummed in the air between them. Anticipation. Why? I deadpanned. I was getting frustrated again. What did I have to do to get a straight answer? For what? Why here? The young man looked around as if hoping that someone else might answer, but when no one spoke up, he turned to me again. "This is where we were told to wait." My mouth dropped open and I forced it to close again. I was in awe at how he thought that was a suitable answer. I opened my mouth another time to say something concise, something like, "Who the hell told you to wait here?" But all that came out was a strangled sound, like I was an animal that had been shot by a bow and arrow. I went inside, shutting down and defaulting into walking up my front steps, locking the door again behind me. I tossed my bag down and pulled out my phone, calling Casey. I didn't know what else to do. My cats meowed at my feet, scratching at my ankles. "Stop calling this number," he said after a couple of rings, his voice slightly breathless. "I'm serious, dude. If you don't stop, I'll..." "It's me," I said, slumping down into a chair at my kitchen table. I looked around just to make sure nothing seemed tampered with, although my door had still been locked when I got home. "Oh, sorry, man. I'm on a run. I just assumed it was that guy again." "What's up?" Y'all, for a second I thought we were in for a plot twist. I thought that the idea was that it was him calling him and there was some different timeline stuff going on, but anyway, let's continue. I paused to swallow, collecting my words and lining them up in my head like those people outside, one after another. "You know that man I told you about who was standing outside my house this morning?" "Yeah." I let out a shaky breath. "He's still here, and there are more of them now." I heard him stop running, his breathing hard and his clothes rustling as he readjusted them. "Are you serious?" "Yeah." For some reason, I felt on the verge of tears. I didn't want to be a baby. I just didn't like situations like this, situations where I felt like I needed help. But my anxiety was bad enough as it was. I just wanted someone else to see the same thing I was, affirm that my fear was justified. "Hang on," he panted. "I'm only a few blocks away from you. I'll come over." "Okay," I muttered, resisting the urge to tell him to be careful. That was stupid. The people outside hadn't shown any signs of being dangerous. "Thanks." I watched out my front window, waiting for him to arrive. I watched the people in line. Some had sat down on the curb, some were checking their phones. The first man and an old woman behind him were having an animated conversation. Before my very eyes, 2 more people joined, walking up from somewhere down the street. Casey stared at them as he jogged up my driveway, his eyebrows furrowed in confusion. They stared right back at him, some whispering amongst themselves. I unlocked the door for him, letting him inside. He was drenched in sweat, his hair even greasier than it had been that morning. "You weren't kidding," was the first thing he said, peering through the blinds like I had just been doing. "No," I choked out, beginning to pace. "Why would I joke about this?" "I don't know." He ran his fingers through his hair. "To freak me out? When have I ever done something like that?" Despite everything, despite the way my face was screwed up as if I was in physical pain, he grinned at me. "Thought maybe you were trying something new." "Casey?" "Okay, I'm sorry." He nodded, looking up at the ceiling like he was mulling it over. "Let's call the police." The patrol car that pulled up carried a heavy-set bald man with a blonde mustache, a man who looked unequivocally like a cop. He came to the door while looking behind his shoulder, just like Casey had. I told him about the man. I told him I tried to talk to them, to not much success. I told him I was worried for my own safety, just like Casey had instructed me to before his arrival. "It's just like at the doctor," he had said. "Exaggerate so they have to take it seriously." The cop agreed that it was strange. "Give me a moment," he told me. "I'll try and get some answers." Casey and I watched as he went up to the line, starting with the man at the front. I could see their mouths moving, but there was no way to know what they were saying from there. The man nodded at something, and the cop shrugged. Everything seemed very ordinary, as if none of this was anything of any urgency. Casey and I shared a nervous look. "Here's the thing," the cop said when he finally returned to my front door, after seeming to speak to a few more of them. "They don't seem very talkative. Best I can assume is that some kind of social experiment type deal, or a prank, but they don't seem to be aggressive or of ill intention." I could do nothing but stare at him. Casey was the one to speak after a moment of empty air. "Can't you tell them to go away?" The cop sighed, taking a moment to speak in a low voice into his radio. "They're on public property." "They're in front of my house," I managed to squeak. "They're inches from my lawn." The man nodded sympathetically in a way that didn't feel entirely sincere. "I understand that. Unfortunately, I can't do much unless they pose an active threat." I could tell he was already detaching himself from this situation, losing interest in our conversation. "Call us again if they do anything else." I watched him go, offering me one last curt nod. I couldn't believe it. When I turned, Casey was shaking his head in dismay, looking just as exasperated as I was feeling. He stayed for a while, then told me he would have to go home. It was dark by then, the streetlights illuminating the standing bodies lying down the sidewalk. They weren't even leaving for the night. "I'm sorry," he winced. "I have to feed my dog and try to get some rest. I'll call you first thing in the morning and check in, okay?" I just nodded. My throat felt tight. It was taking everything in me not to beg him to stay. I didn't want to be alone. But even more than that, I didn't want to seem desperate. He searched my face, apprehensive. I could tell he felt guilty. "Will you tell me if anything changes?" I nodded again, summoning my strength. "Don't worry, Casey. I'm good. Are you sure you're okay walking home? I could give you a ride." I said it thinking of the people outside, as if one of them might chase him down. But as soon as it left my mouth, I remembered his weird phone calls. It occurred to me that he might be scared right now, too. Still, he shook his head. "I'll be fine. I'm fast. I'll run." He punctuated the sentence with a laugh. "Okay, cool. I'll see you tomorrow." "Cool." He hovered awkwardly by the door for a moment before giving me a handshake, slapping my hand. I was sure I was sweaty, but he didn't show any acknowledgement, which I immensely appreciated. As soon as he was gone, the house settled into an uncanny quiet. I turned on all the lamps, closed all my shades, and double-checked that all the doors were locked. Then I went to bed, praying that when I woke up, things would be back to normal, but they weren't. The second I opened my eyes the next day, a deep feeling of dread closed in on me. There had to be more than 70 people now, lined up down my street. I walked down my driveway, staring in horror. Some of them had brought chairs. Some were sleeping, curled up against the rain gutters. Some seemed wide awake, bouncing anxiously on the balls of their feet. I couldn't even see all the way to the end of the line, as it curved where the street did, disappearing around a bend. I felt like my brain was breaking. I sucked up all my nerves and walked down the line, trying to determine if I recognized a single one of them. Some of them were more willing to talk to me than others. Some of them just looked at me nervously or avoided my eyes entirely. I started asking each of them what they were waiting for, to varying degrees of success, but no one would give me a completely straight answer. "I'm here for my son. I need another chance," one woman told me, but when I asked her what she meant, she only shook her head at me apologetically. "They all think that being first in line means they'll be first," another woman said, as if she was just gossiping, as if I had any idea what she was talking about, "but I don't think that's how it works. Still, it's good to be here early, probably. Shows you really want it." One man, when I focused in on him, burst into tears. The people next to him in line rubbed his back. I was walking back up the line towards my house in a daze of confusion and still half awake when someone grabbed my sleeve. Her eyes were wide and watery, and her fingers trembled as she held on to me. "It'll happen soon," she whispered quickly, quietly. The faces of the people around her darkened, glaring at her. "You know what to do. I know you know what to do." I sprinted back to my house, slamming the door behind me. I had 2 missed calls from Casey. I called him back and he answered on the first ring. "Dude, I was worried. I know you're always up by now." "I'm okay," I muttered, still out of breath from running back. "Casey, there are so many people now. They're all the way down the block." "Oh my god, are you serious?" "Yes, and they're so weird. I don't know what they..." "Hang on, why are you up so early?" I could almost hear him shrugging through the phone. "Didn't sleep much." "Why?" There was a beat. I kept feeling like someone was in my house. I could feel myself frowning, my mouth turning down. I swallowed hard. "Casey?" I know, it's stupid. Are you coming to work?" I walked down the hall to my room, still holding the phone up to my ear, just to do something, just to keep moving. "I guess so. I don't know what else to do." He sighed in relief. "Okay, great. I'll see you there. I'll see you there. When I got back out to the living room, I nearly leapt out of my skin. There was a man standing at my window, his hands pressed to the glass, peering inside. As soon as he noticed me, he sprinted away, and I watched him reclaim his spot in line, about 5 houses down from my own. The next few days kept me in a constant state of fight or flight. When I drove home from work, I started passing the line 5 minutes before I pulled into my driveway, then 6. The line only multiplied. It was like the population of an entire town had coordinated to stand in front of my doorstep. I called the police several more times. To their credit, they did finally try and tell the line to leave. Threatened them with loitering charges. Once they really did start to disperse, and the relief I felt was incomparable. But as soon as the squad car pulled away, they were back. I started to feel hopeless. On my days off, I just sat inside with the blinds drawn, obsessively checking to see if anything had changed every few minutes. I wasn't sure at this point if it would unnerve me more if it did or if it didn't. Either way, I would have no explanation. The atmosphere was changing. The buzz that had been hovering in the air since those first few people arrived was only growing stronger. They were waiting for something, and it was coming. It was getting closer. The next Wednesday, Casey called me as I lay in bed, waiting for exhaustion to hit me. It was around 10 p.m., long past when I used to go to bed so I could wake up early. I had given up on routine. "John," he said when I picked up. I immediately sat up in bed. His tone was different. This was not the usual bubbly, self-assured Casey. "What's wrong?" I could have sworn I heard a whimper. "Can I come over? Can I sleep over there?" "Of course," I said right away. It was so scary to hear him like this. "Of course you can. What's going on?" "There's someone here. I know it. You have to believe me." I felt like my heart might crack one of my ribs. "I do. I believe you." "I'll be over in 10, he said, and hung up the phone. The next 10 minutes were torture. I watched out my window, this time almost completely ignoring the line. I hardly cared about the line right then, for the first time since it began. When its headlights illuminated the front of my house, I opened the front door. He pulled in behind my van and started slowly, quietly, from somewhere midline. Someone started cheering. Slowly, they all joined in until the neighborhood was flooded with the sound of clapping hands. I ushered Casey inside. He wasn't himself, dragging his fingertips through his hair and licking his lips. If I didn't know him, I might have assumed he was on drugs. His phone rang, and the sound made both of us jump. He shook his head, staring at it for a moment before chucking it at the floor. It shattered. "Okay," I said slowly, putting my hand carefully on his back. "Okay, let's sit down." I watched TV with him late into the night, glancing at him from the corner of my eye until I saw his shoulders slump a little and his breathing slow. At around 2 a.m., I realized he was asleep, his head half resting on my shoulder. I eased him down onto the couch, covered him in a blanket, and retreated quietly to my room, careful to shut the door softly so as not to wake him. I woke up about an hour and a half later to the sound of cheering. My headphones had fallen off at some point when I must have rolled over. It was muffled, dampened only by the walls between my room and the outside, but it was loud enough to force my eyes open. I sat up, groggily rubbing my eyes, trying to comprehend what was happening. Then I remembered Casey, out on the couch, asleep, and then I heard something from the kitchen. I got out of bed, my feet hitting the carpet, warm from the summer night. The cheering kept going, like the backtrack of a sitcom. It made my stomach twist like someone had their hands in there, tying my intestines into knots. The pieces of Casey's shattered phone was still scattered on the kitchen floor. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I could see that wasn't the only thing different about the room. Half of my drawers were open, and the contents emptied onto the counters. A chair had been tipped over too, sitting on its back on the tile floor. I heard a rustle from the other room, and my head flew up so fast I heard my neck pop. A man stood in my living room, in the dark. He was reaching for the zipper of his black rain jacket, the hood covering his hair. We made eye contact as he zipped it up to cover his face, but not before I recognized him as the man from the store. The one who had been so upset about the phone return. The one who had threatened Casey in the parking lot afterwards. The one who had been calling him nonstop ever since. He dropped something and hit the living room rug with a thump. Then he ran, leaping out of the back window that I must have forgotten to lock the night before. My fear kept me frozen in place, completely still. I didn't even think to chase him. I looked at what he'd dropped. It was one of my kitchen knives, and it was covered in something dark and red and viscous. I looked at the couch, facing away from me, where Casey's hand was draped over the arm, limp. Casey was dead. I knew it before I even rounded the corner and looked into his slack, pale face. When the cops got there, I was kneeled in front of the couch, my face buried in his chest, my clothes soaked in his blood. It had been all I could make myself do. All I could say to him was, "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. Forgive me for not saving you." As they dragged me outside, needing 3 officers to even support my full weight, The cheering got louder. It echoed down the street, a raucous and grating sound that made my head spin. I saw some of their faces under the streetlights, some beaming at me and some looking utterly heartbroken on my behalf. Like they knew. It felt like slow motion as they hauled me into the squad car. As I watched out the window as we pulled away and the ambulances pulled up, lights not even on, siren replaced with that awful cheering. And down the street, down the line, someone began to rise. A figure was plucked out of the line and began to rise in the air as if there was some invisible beam drawing them up and up and up, hovering above the rest. They had been chosen. The cheering began to die down. Some cried out in distress and protest, falling to their knees or pulling at their own hair. Some just watched. I watched in horror as my surroundings began to flicker and to change before my eyes. My house shuddered and rippled, and then it wasn't my house anymore. The neighborhood shifted, and it was no longer my neighborhood. We were in the city. The streets filled with cars, and my home was now a tall apartment building spotted with window lights cutting through the darkness. In my holding cell, I was nothing. I was no one. All feeling had left my body, leaving me cold and numb. They asked me if I wanted to make a call, and I said nothing. I had no one I wanted to call. I kept thinking, maybe if I had done something differently, if I had stayed on the couch with him or taken all the warning signs more seriously, if I hadn't worn headphones to bed. If I had done something differently, he would still be here. My best friend. He would still be alive. I hardly noticed when someone started talking to me. Not until they touched my arm. "You failed," they said, their wispy voice hardly penetrating my ears. Nothing changed. It was a man, maybe a cop that was out of uniform, but maybe not. He felt strange, like something I couldn't fully get a grasp on, even while looking directly at it. I couldn't describe to you what he looked like. I nodded. It was all I could think to do. I just wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to last night, or before then even, and do it differently. If I could just try again, I would have saved him. "It's okay," he said sympathetically. He took my hand through the bars. "You can try again. Do you remember me?" I shook my head. He took a Sharpie out of his jacket pocket and began to write on the back of my hand. I let him. "Go to this address," he said softly. "On this date, wait there. If you're chosen, you won't remember this. You won't remember anything. You'll be taken back to before it happened again." He spoke to me as if I were a child, his eyes looking over my face, searching for any recognition. He found none. If you interact with anyone while you're waiting, do not tell them why you're there. You cannot help them change what they need to change. They need to do it on their own. He smiled at me. He had a kind face, but something was slightly wrong about it. Slightly sharpened like the tip of a knife. "Good luck, John." And then he was gone. I'm home now. My real home. Not the shifting fabricated one from before my friend was murdered. I got out on bail and I've been put on house arrest for the time being. I'm still a suspect, but my lawyer is hopeful. He says if they let me out at all, they must know deep down that it wasn't me who killed Casey. I haven't washed off what the man wrote yet. I just keep staring at it. The date is in a week. My court date is a few days after that. Not sure if I'll try again. I'm not sure if anything would change. I think it's in my nature to be a coward. Maybe that's what he's trying to teach me. I'm just not sure if I'm ready to learn. Guys, oh my god. The goosebumps that I got. For a good chunk of the story, I thought we just weren't going to get an explanation as to why these people were here, but I should have had faith because this author is so good at writing stories. This ending was literally perfect. What a way to tie it all in. Unfortunately, his friend's fate, Casey's fate, was just to be murdered by that crazy guy who was pissed about his phone. And all those people waiting outside of John's house were there because they were in a situation like him where something really terrible happened or they lost someone and they were told, if you go wait at this address and you're chosen, it can be undone. So they thought, what happened to me is so horrific, I might as well take the chance. And now with John, the cycle is going to continue. Should he choose to go wait in line. That was so good. I don't even know what else to say. That was an incredible story. Thank you guys so much. All 3 of today's stories were so good. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Creepy Crochet and Creepypasta. Check out the Mothman pattern. Send me your scary story at lidslunacy@gmail.com for a chance to have it featured on the channel. I am literally losing my voice at this point. Thank you all so much for being here. Like and subscribe should you feel so inclined, and I love y'all so much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!